What's going on, everybody? Today we are going to do our match day predictions, and we will be doing these for every single game, essentially. We will go week by week, match day by match day, and we will go about it that way, and we'll see how we do. We'll keep track and see how we do going forward, and we'll probably create a little point system there. You get the result right, you get a point. You get another point if you get the score right. We'll just do it that way, but forward we go. It's week 1. I'm excited. Everyone's excited at football back. We had a couple weeks off there, but we'll be going right back into the season, into what should be a very difficult season for everybody. I expect personally this year that points will drop off a little bit more. Those points that you see Liverpool and City get, I don't expect it this time around. Probably the winner probably may break 90, but I don't expect any crazy totals like Liverpool and City have put up the last couple of years. There will be a lot of rotation, and some of these deeper squads will have good years. Some of these thinner squads will have probably difficult years. But let's jump into this. We'll start. There are 8 games this week. Manchester United, Manchester City, Aston Villa, and Burnley are all off. Manchester City and Manchester United got an extra week or two to get back into the swing of things after they had to go and play in Europe. So let's start. Game number 1, Fulham and Arsenal. They will be kicking off the Premier League, and this is tough for Fulham to come into the Premier League. They have to get their new signings gelled in, things like that, and play an Arsenal team who ended last year on a bit of a bounce, getting a trophy, and then starting the year Community Shield, getting themselves a little bit of a bounce. I expect Arsenal to roll a little bit here, maybe take them a little bit to get a goal. That'll be Arsenal's problem this year, breaking down blocks. I think they're going to have a pretty decent season, but whether it's top 4 worthy or not, we'll have to see. But I expect Arsenal will struggle breaking down blocks, but Fulham coming into the Premier League against a good Arsenal side, I think they can manage it today. 3-0 the final. I like it here. Fulham to drop early, Arsenal to go top of the table early on. Game number 2, Crystal Palace versus Southampton. This one is a bit of a tough one. 2 teams who probably ended the year in opposite fashions. Southampton, after starting really poorly, had a really, really good end to the year. Crystal Palace, the opposite. Started pretty well, fell off toward the end of the year. Didn't have too many good games toward the end of last year there. And while they were already safe, that's still a worrying sign. I like Southampton here. I think they sneak a win, 1-0. Maybe a late goal, 2-0, but I think 1-0 is going to be the score I go with. This will be tough, but I think Southampton are just in a better position. They seem to be all behind the manager there, and Crystal Palace have some problems that I expect to manifest a little bit more as the season starts off here. I actually kind of think Crystal Palace are going to have a not-so-great year. I think they're on the verge of looking to find a new manager. Things have gone a little bit stale, so we'll see what happens. But Southampton to start here with a win, 1-0. Next, we have Leeds. Liverpool, Leeds. Leeds, of course, top of the championship, just coming up. A pretty good squad. They've put in some really good signings as well. Rodrigo up front. Good defender at the back. Tried to get Ben White back. That would have been a really good signing to keep around. But Leeds have a habit of starting really quickly and then fading a little bit. Last year they had their fade, but they managed to right the ship just enough to keep themselves up toward the end, up on top. Liverpool, on the other hand, kind of walked their way to the title after coming back last year. It's weird with Liverpool because as a fan, when you watched them last year after the comeback, they had 2 really important games. It was the Crystal Palace game. After they came back, they drew with Everton, always a tough game for Liverpool. Drew with Everton, and then they had the Palace game where they walked away from Crystal Palace, played really, really well, and then they won the title pretty much, and then took their foot off the gas up until the last game of the season where it seemed like they were really interested and were really impressive again, 5-3 being the final. It's weird. I don't know what Liverpool to expect here, and I know the mood is kind of weird around the club. They're not really bringing in any new faces, and some people are worried about that. I expect them to get off to a win here, start off the season with a win here, 2-1 in the end. Leeds will give up a good fight, and I worry about this game just a little bit, but I think Liverpool, in the end, a 2-1 victory, and they escape day one with the 3 points and give themselves a little bit of a chance to kind of get back into their groove. Next, we have West Ham and Newcastle. This is another one of those games that has big implications early on. I expect West Ham and Newcastle to be bottom half teams, so whenever you play another bottom half team, they're kind of big games. Newcastle, good business so far. Whether everybody's fit and ready to go, they just bought 3 new players in very recently. Fraser, Callum Wilson, and Jamal Lewis. All 3 are really good players, but all happened this week already, only a day or 2 ago, and their first game with the team is just over the weekend. You're going to have to give them time a little bit to gel in and see what happens there. West Ham, I don't actually expect West Ham to have a good season. I think they're going to have a not-so-great season, but this will be a tough one. This is one of those ones that has draw written all over it, though. 1-1 I'm going to go with, and those two start off with a draw. Next, West Brom and Leicester. Now, West Brom, when they're in the Premier League, they have a tendency to be tricky, and they tend to go about things the right way when you're lower end. They defend really well. They take advantage of their set pieces. They've had a pretty decent summer. They're probably really happy signing the West Ham forward on a permanent deal. West Ham fans weren't too happy. West Brom fans were over the moon. They've had a pretty decent summer, but this West Brom team, I struggle to see them having one of those years where they finish 15th, 14th. Obviously, they're just coming up, and this will be a scrap. Everything they do is a scrap. And they're playing a really good Leicester side who last year fell off really late. I think Brendan Rodgers and the rest of them have had a summer to think. Chilwell is gone. Castagne's in at left back. Still a good player. Probably a decent swap in terms of money. Castagne and $30 million for Chilwell. They'll probably take that most weeks, as would a lot of people. We'll see how the rest of their summer goes. But Leicester, I think, will strengthen a little bit. But they are a good team. This will be tough opening day, but I think they're going to sneak by 1-0. Leicester go ahead of West Brom there and sneak away with a win. This one here is probably the tightest game, I think, coming up. Tottenham and Everton. Probably the tightest game of the week. Now, this is important for both of these teams. Now, both of these teams will probably have pretty high expectations of themselves this year. Whether the rest of the league has high expectations of them is different. But I expect Everton to improve quite a bit. They redid their entire midfield the other day, transfer-wise. I expect that to take a little bit to gel. Decore, James Rodriguez, and Allen coming in. 2 fighters in midfield, and James Rodriguez, of course, a bit more creative. We'll see how they end up working out or whether they're all ready to roll week 1, but this will be one of those seasons as well for Tottenham where they want to step forward. And they've had I don't want to see a bad window. I think they've had a Mourinho type of window in terms of what has happened in the end of last year. I think he wanted to bring in players who were less prone to mistakes. At right back, he's certainly done that with Doherty. And then in midfield with Højbjerg as well. So it'll be... I don't think they're a wildly better team, but I think they're a more structured team with those signings. So you may get a little bit more Mourinho this year than you did last year. But as I said, 2 teams, pretty high season expectations of themselves. They both want to take that step forward, and they both run into each other and come away with a 1-1. That's always how that happens, isn't it? It has to be a 1-1 here. Tottenham and Everton start off the year with a draw. Next, we have Sheffield United and Wolves. This one happened late last year, and it was very, very tight. Sheffield United have done some pretty decent business. 2 pretty good fullbacks. and then Oliver Burke as well. Wolves, on the other hand, have spent their money bringing in kids, of course, spending £35 million on the striker Fabio Silva, who will have time to develop behind a really, really good striker in Raul Jimenez. I think they wanted to bring in a really good right back in Maitland-Niles. It didn't really happen. After Maitland-Niles had himself a really good Community Shield, it seemed like that deal kind of died off after he got an England call-up and stuff like that, and I think Arsenal thought maybe we better keep a hold of him for a little bit longer. But they've done decent business. They've got that young midfielder in as well from Porto, loan to buy. I expect them to buy, and then, of course, Marçal, left back, and then left center back if he has to. That's a really good set of business they've done there. So not crazy wild signings from either team, but signings with plenty of potential to bring both teams forward. Now, Wolves last year probably had the season that they were looking for. You expect them to kind of push for these top 6 or 7 spots every year. They expect to push for these top 6 or 7 spots every year. As well, Sheffield United kind of were up there against all odds. Second year in the Premier League, this is normally the toughest year for most teams who want to stick around in the Premier League. That second year, staying up the first year, and then the second year really pushing forward and starting to cement a squad that would keep you here perennially. So I kind of expect Sheffield United to dip off just a little bit. Whether it happens in this game or not, we shall see. I think this one is also like the Tottenham-Everton game. This one kind of has draw written all over it. It had draw written all over the other one, if not for a late goal. 0-0. This is probably going to be the only 0-0 of the weekend, but Sheffield United like themselves a clean sheet. Wolves don't want to lose opening day. I like 0-0 here. And then the final game, Brighton and Chelsea. Brighton, who have probably had a pretty decent year last year. Of course, bringing in a new manager, and he's, working around a squad that's not necessarily his, trying to, bring in some new faces here and there. But they were playing pretty decent football, Brighton, toward the end of last year. They seemed to start getting in the groove. And then, of course, Chelsea, who have had the probably the best window, definitely bought in some big old names. Whether they gel right off the bat will be a different story. Of course, it takes a little bit for some players to gel into the Premier League. A lot of these players from outside the country, we'll see if they gel right away. If they do, they are going to be one heck of a force. But as for the game itself, Chelsea, it just seems like they're too much. I think Brighton are going to come into this year knowing that they're good enough to stay up, and I think they're going to try playing their football to start the year. Whether it's good enough against top teams, we'll find out. This reminds me a lot of how Eddie Howe came in, and they got up to the Premier League, and they weren't scared of anyone, and they were going to play their football. I think Graham Potter last year figured out that they're good enough to play their football, especially against teams outside the top 7. I think they're going to play it. I think they're going to start off the year playing it. It may be difficult to get at Chelsea, but I think they'll look at this as a game where they can afford to lose. They're going to go at it a little bit, but I think Chelsea, in the end, too much for Brighton. 3-1 the final there. So, those are the 8 games. 3-0 to Arsenal, 1-0 to Southampton, Liverpool 2-1, West Ham and Newcastle to draw, Leicester to win 1-0, Tottenham and Everton to draw, Sheffield United and Wolves to draw, and then Chelsea to beat Brighton, guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. We'll be doing this every week and keeping track of our scores and how they go every week. I think we're going to be doing a weekend roundup at the end of the week as well. But we'll see, guys. But that is it. Hope you've enjoyed. Stay tuned for more. And peace.